Toulouse, France, 1943. A German checkpoint on the road out of the city. A soldier with a machine gun scans every face that passes. One wrong move, one bead of sweat, and you're done. Most travelers are terrified, but not the woman in the stylish coat approaching the guard. She's smiling. She leans in close and whispers something. The guard laughs nervously and waves her through. He just let the most wanted person in France walk past him. The Gestapo had put a 5 million franc bounty on her head, the highest in the country, higher than any general, higher than any spy. Her code name, the White Mouse. Her real name, Nancy Wake. And this Australian woman, hard-drinking, fearless, unstoppable, would kill more Nazis than most infantry battalions. She would bicycle 300 miles through enemy territory in 72 hours. She would lead 7,000 battle-hardened men. She would kill a German sentry with her bare hands, and the Gestapo would never catch her. This story isn't in the history books your kids read, but it should be, because by the time I'm done, you'll understand what real courage looks like. How does an Australian woman become the Gestapo's nightmare? It starts in Vienna, 1933. Nancy Wake was a freelance journalist, 21 years old, drinking champagne in Paris, interviewing diplomats. She was living the dream. But in 1933, she went to Vienna. What she saw there changed everything. That's where she saw the face of the enemy, not in a newsreel, but on the street. She watched Nazi gangs, brown shirts, beating Jewish men and women. They were tying them to giant wheels, whipping them in public. And the crowds? The crowds weren't looking away in shame. They were cheering. Nancy made a vow right there on that Vienna street. If I ever get the chance, I'm going to make these bastards pay. Now, most people make promises like that and do nothing. They go home. They forget. They move on with their lives. Nancy Wake was not most people. She would get that chance. And when she did, she wouldn't just fight back. She would become a legend. But first, she had to survive. 1940. Germany conquers France in 6 weeks. Nancy is married to a wealthy industrialist in Marseille. She's rich. She's safe. She could sit out the war. Instead, she buys an ambulance and joins the resistance. Her mission: smuggle Allied pilots over the Pyrenees into Spain. Get caught? Torture and execution. Nancy doesn't care. Dangerous work. You get caught, it's not a slap on the wrist. It's a bullet in the back of the head. Or worse, a trip to Avenue Foch. But Nancy was fearless. She'd sit on a train packed with German infantry, contraband radio parts in her handbag, and flirt with the officers. She played the dumb housewife card perfectly. They'd look at the lipstick, the smile, and wave her through. They saw a pretty face. She saw targets. The Gestapo wasn't stupid, though. They knew someone was running circles around them. They dubbed her the White Mouse because they couldn't catch her. She was too fast, too smart. But the net tightened. By 43, they had her phone tapped. They were intercepting her mail. They were closing in. Henry sat her down and told her the hard truth. You have to go, or we both die. Leaving him was the hardest thing she ever did, but she ran. She tried to cross the Pyrenees 6 times. 6th time was the charm. But we're not talking about a hike. We're talking about climbing a mountain range on foot in heavy snow, dodging patrols with dogs. She wasn't wearing North Face gear. She was in street clothes and heels half the time. She walked until her feet bled, then she walked some more. She jumped off moving trains to avoid checkpoints. She was shot at. She hid in barns under haystacks while German patrols poked pitchforks inches from her face. She made it to Spain, then to England. She was safe. Job done, right? She did her part. Time to sit out the rest of the war in London, filing paperwork. Nancy had other plans. What she did next would either make her the most dangerous woman in Europe or get her killed in the most brutal way imaginable. Maybe both. London, 1943. She walks into an unmarked building on Baker Street. The Special Operations Executive, the SOE, Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. This wasn't regular army. This was where they trained assassins, saboteurs, and people crazy enough to jump out of perfectly good airplanes into Nazi-occupied territory. These guys weren't regular army. They were pirates. Their motto was, "Set Europe ablaze." They didn't want soldiers who marched in a line. They wanted killers who could lie, cheat, and blow things up. They wanted people who could slit a throat in a dark alley and then order a cocktail in perfect French. Nancy fit the bill. The interview was short. They told her, "Mrs. Fiocca, 50% chance you die. If you get caught, the Gestapo will torture you. We can't help you. No diplomatic immunity. No rescue team." Nancy lit a cigarette, blew smoke at the ceiling, and asked, "When do I start?" But before she left for training, she made herself a promise. No matter what they taught her, no matter how brutal the war became, she would stay human. She'd seen what the Nazis had become, monsters who'd lost every shred of decency. She refused to become like them. She'd kill when necessary, but she'd never enjoy it. She'd never lose the part of herself that felt remorse. The training was brutal. They sent her to Scotland to learn the dark arts. This wasn't basic training. This was a master class in mayhem. They taught her explosives. Plastic explosive number 808. Looks like marzipan, smells like almonds. You can hit it with a hammer, and nothing happens. But stick a detonator in it, and it'll cut a steel bridge in half. They drilled her on usage, placement, tamping, fusing. This wasn't specialized knowledge. It was survival. They taught her the Fairbairn Sykes fighting method. Gutter fighting. No rules. There is no fair play when you are fighting a Nazi. Kick the knee, gouge the eye, crush the windpipe. It's him or you. The mindset was simple. Aggression wins. Attack, attack, attack. And guns? She fell in love with the Sten gun. That cheap, stamped metal submachine gun that looked like a plumber's nightmare. It rattled, it jammed, but it sprayed 9mm death at 500 rounds a minute. Nancy was a crack shot. She understood the weapon's quirks. She knew how to tap the magazine to keep it feeding. Her instructor wrote, "She is the most feminine woman I know until the fighting starts. Then she is like 5 men. Think about that. Like 5 men. That's high praise from a British commando. By April 1944, she was ready to jump back into the fire. Her kit was standard SOE issue, but she modified it for speed. A .32 Webley revolver, reliable, close range, good stopping power. A fighting knife, for when the ammo runs dry. A cyanide pill hidden in her clothes, just in case capture was imminent. 1,000,000 francs in cash, bribery works, and a silk map of France. Why silk? Because paper rustles. Silk is silent, and if you run out of bandages, you can use it. She parachuted into the Auvergne region. Pitch-black night. Her chute snagged in a tree. She's dangling there, feet off the ground. A French resistance leader, Henri Tardivat, shines a flashlight on her. He tries to be poetic. "I hope all the trees in France bear such beautiful fruit." Nancy snaps back, "Don't give me that French shit. Cut me down." That set the tone. She took charge of 7,000 Maquis fighters. These guys were rough, farmers, communists, Spanish Civil War vets. They didn't like taking orders from a woman. They were used to rough living, bad food, and no discipline. But then they saw her work. She organized airdrops. She brought in guns, ammo, boots. She taught them how to use a bazooka, by reading the manual 5 minutes before the demo. She showed them how to kill tanks. She turned a mob into an army. And they needed it, because the SS was coming. And I need you to understand something here. What happens next isn't Hollywood. This isn't a training montage where the good guys win because they believe in themselves. This is 7,000 lightly armed farmers and factory workers about to face 22,000 SS troops with tanks, artillery, and air support. This is a slaughter waiting to happen. And Nancy Wake knows it. To understand why this battle was so insane, look at the map. Mont Mouchet. It's a plateau. Gaspard, the French colonel in charge, decided to dig trenches and fight a conventional battle. He wanted a stand-up fight. Nancy looked at him like he was crazy. "You don't fight tanks with rifles," she said. "You hit, run, and vanish." She knew asymmetric warfare. Gaspard was thinking in terms of WWII. He wanted a redoubt. He wanted to show the world the French could hold ground. He got his wish, and he almost got everyone killed. On June 2nd, the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, rolled up. These guys weren't conscripts. They were battle-hardened killers fresh from the Russian front. They had Panthers. They had half-tracks. They had air support. The French had courage and light arms. Guess who wins that fight? The first contact was a probe, a company of SS infantry with armored cars. They came up the D3 road from Saint-Chély-d'Apcher. The Maquis hit them with a Piatti round at 50 yards. Mobility kill. The armored car slewed sideways, blocking the road. The SS infantry dismounted and returned fire. MG-42s, 200 rounds per minute. The sound is unmistakable, like ripping canvas, like the world coming apart. The Maquis fired back from the tree line, Bren guns, Lee Enfields. They held for 2 hours. Then the Germans brought up mortars, 81 mm high explosive. The trees started coming apart. The Maquis pulled back. First blood to the resistance, but it was just a probe. The SS pulled back, called for reinforcements, and waited. For the next week it was a stalemate. Small firefights, patrols clashing in the woods. The Germans were feeling out the defenses, probing for weak points. The Maquis held their ground, but the Germans were bringing up heavy units. Nancy could hear them at night. The rumble of tank engines, the clank of treads on stone. They were massing for a major assault. She radioed London. "We need air support, we need artillery, we need armor." London replied, "Negative. All assets committed to Normandy. You are on your own. Advise withdrawal." Nancy showed the message to Gaspard. He crumpled it up and threw it in the fire. "We stay." On June 10th, the hammer fell. The Germans attacked from 3 sides simultaneously. Pincer movement, classic combined arms assault. Infantry, armor, artillery, air. The barrage started at dawn. 105 mm howitzers. The shells came in with a freight train sound, then detonated with a crack that shook your fillings loose. Trees vaporized. Dirt geysered 50 feet in the air. Men disappeared in the blast overpressure. The Maquis had never experienced anything like this. This wasn't a raid. This wasn't an ambush. This was industrial-scale violence. This was what happens when a modern military decides to erase you from the map. The shelling lasted 30 minutes. Then it lifted, and the panzers came. Panzer Fees and Panthers rolling through the forest trails like steel dinosaurs, turrets traversing, searching for targets. The 75 mm guns fired on the move. High explosive and armor-piercing, alternating. They didn't know what they were shooting at. They were just hosing down the forest. Behind the tanks, SS infantry, moving in squad rushes, fire and maneuver. These guys were professionals. The Maquis opened fire. Small arms, useless. The rounds pinged off the Panther armor like hail on a tin roof. The Piat teams tried to get in close. One crew got off a shot at 30 yards, hit the glacis. The round bounced off. The Panther's coaxial MG-34 cut them down. Another Piat team flanked a Panzer IV, got a shot at the side armor. Penetration. The tank brewed up, ammunition cooking off, black smoke pouring from the hatches. Small victory, but there were 20 more tanks behind it. The southern flank started to collapse. The Germans had broken through. Men were running. Panic is contagious. That's when Nancy showed up. She didn't have a trench. She had a beat-up Citroën Traction Avant, the back seat ripped out, replaced with wooden ammo crates. She'd been driving a circuit around the perimeter all morning, delivering belts for the Bren guns, clips for the rifles, grenades. She was the glue holding the line together. At one point, the southern flank broke. Men started running. A rout is contagious. If one guy runs, they all run. Nancy drove her car right into the retreat. She jumped out, Sten gun in hand, and screamed over the explosions. "Where the hell are you going? You want to die with a bullet in." "You're back? Get back on the line." She grabbed a terrified kid by the collar and shoved him back toward the enemy. She started firing herself. The men stopped. They saw this woman standing tall while mortar shells rained down, and they found their spine. They went back, but courage doesn't stop physics. The Germans had tanks. The French pressed back, but they were being slaughtered. There was a moment in a clearing used as a triage station. A Stuka dive bomber screamed down, that Jericho trumpet siren that turns your blood to ice. Nancy didn't dive. She ran to the wounded. She dragged men into the tree line while the bombs hit. She was buried in dirt, ears bleeding from the concussion. She shook it off and went back for more. By afternoon, it was over. Gaspar finally realized his mistake. "Disperse," he ordered. "Melt away." Nancy organized the rearguard. She picked the Spanish Civil War vets, tough bastards who knew how to die. They held a bridge against an SS battalion for 3 hours until their gun barrels were glowing red. They bought time for the rest to escape. When the last truck was clear, Nancy blew the bridge. Boom, panzers in the ravine. It was a defeat, but it was a costly one for the Nazis. The resistance delayed the 2nd SS Panzer Division for 10 days. Those were 10 days those tanks weren't in Normandy shooting at American GIs on Omaha Beach. Nancy Wake was worth a division all by herself. But the Maquis were scattered. Their radio, the only link to London, was destroyed in the retreat. They were blind. No ammo drops, no food, no orders. A resistance army without a radio is just a bunch of guys hiding in the woods waiting to starve or get hunted down one by one. "We need London," Gaspard said, head in his hands. "But the radio is gone. The nearest working radio is in Châteauroux. That's over 150 miles away, through German checkpoints, milice patrols. It's suicide." Silence. Every man in that room knew it was over. Then Nancy stood up, brushed the dirt off her skirt, and checked her pistol. "I'll get you a radio." The men stared at her. "You'll what?" "I said I'll get you a radio. I'll be back in 3 days." What she was about to do would be talked about for the next 70 years. And if you're thinking it sounds impossible, you're right. It was impossible. But she did it anyway. This is where the legend starts. The bike ride. And before you think, "Oh, a nice bike ride through France," wipe that image from your head. This wasn't the Tour de France. This was a marathon through the jaws of death. She had to travel 300 miles, round trip, through enemy territory in 72 hours, and she didn't have a 10-speed carbon fiber race bike. She found a men's bicycle in a farmhouse. Rusty chain, bald tires, no gears, heavy steel frame meant for a 6-foot farmer. The seat was too high, so she couldn't even sit down half the time. She had to stand on the pedals, grinding it out. And the Auvergne? It's not flat, it's the massive central. Mountains, constant climbing and descending on winding D roads. Some stretches are 8% grade or steeper. Try climbing that on a 1-gear bike with bald tires, and it's June, mountain weather, freezing at night, hot during the day. She's sweating on the climbs, shivering on the descents. She left at dusk, cover ground at night when roads are empty, but no lights. A bike light gets you shot. German patrols shoot at anything that moves after dark. So she's riding in the dark on unfamiliar roads with no lights, feeling her way by the white line at the edge of the pavement. When clouds cover the moon, she's riding blind. First 30 miles, Chaude Aiguë to Saint-Flour. She's fresh. The adrenaline is carrying her. She's making good time. Then, on the outskirts of Saint-Flour, she sees it. A checkpoint. Germans. 3 sentries. A machine gun on a tripod. A barrier across the road. She can't turn around. That looks suspicious. So she slows down, puts on her best, terrified peasant face, and rides up to the barrier. The sentry is drunk. You can smell the schnapps from 10 feet away. He's bored, he's cold, and here's a woman on a bicycle. Entertainment. He grabs her handlebars. "Where are you going, pretty lady?" Nancy's hand is in her bag, on the grip of her Webley revolver. She's running the scenario. Double tap to the chest. The other 2 sentries will react. She can probably get 1 more before they return fire. But the machine gunner will cut her down. And even if she wins, there's a body. And bodies bring investigations. So she plays the part. She whimpers. "Please, sir, my children, they're sick. I need to find a doctor in Saint-Flour." The sentry laughs. He's enjoying her fear. "It's past curfew, madam. You should be home." "Please, I'll be quick. I promise." He looks her up and down. He's thinking about it. Then one of the other sentries says something in German. They laugh. The drunk sentry shoves her away. "Go, run, rabbit, run!" She pedals away, her legs shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump. "Run, rabbit," she thinks. "The white mouse is running, but I'm coming back with teeth." Mile 45. She's climbing out of the Truyère Valley. It's a long, steady climb. 6% grade for 5 miles. Her thighs are burning. She's standing on the pedals, rocking the bike side to side to generate momentum. Her lungs are raw. She's breathing through her mouth, gulping the cold night air. She passes through sleeping villages, Aurillac, Mauriac. She stays on the back roads when she can, avoiding the main routes. But sometimes there's no choice. You have to take the D road because it's the only way through. Mile 75, first mechanical problem. The chain slips. The teeth on the sprocket are worn. She stops, flips the bike, tightens the chain by hand. Her fingers are black with grease. She wipes them on her skirt and keeps going. Dawn breaks. She's been riding for 8 hours. She's covered maybe 60 miles. She needs to keep pace to make the deadline. She's ahead of schedule, but she's also exhausted. Her legs are cramping. She needs water. She needs food. She stops at a farmhouse, knocks on the door. An old woman answers. Nancy says she's traveling to see family. The woman gives her bread and water, doesn't ask questions. In 1944 France, you don't ask questions. Nancy eats the bread as she rides, drinks from the canteen, keeps moving. Mile 95, Ussel. She hits a milice checkpoint. The French milice, collaborators, Frenchmen working for the Germans. In many ways, they're more dangerous than the Germans because they know the local accents, the local families. They can spot a fake ID. There are 4 of them. They're not drunk. They're professionals. An officer steps into the road, holds up his hand. Nancy stops. He looks at her papers, looks at the bike, looks at her legs, which are caked in mud and blood from the crashes. Her stockings are torn. Her skirt is filthy. "You've come a long way, madam," he says slowly. "I'm visiting my sister in Châteauroux. She's ill. On a bicycle. That's 95 miles from here. I couldn't afford the train." He studies her face. He's deciding. Nancy's right hand is in her bag. She's gripping the Webley. If he says, "Come with me," she's going to shoot him and run. She'll probably die, but she's not going to a Gestapo cell. Then, behind them, a horn honks. A German convoy, trucks full of troops. They need to pass. The police officer is flustered. He waves Nancy through to clear the road. "Go, quickly!" She pedals away. Twice now she's been seconds from death, and twice dumb luck saved her. But luck runs out. Mile 125. The sun is setting on day 1. She's been riding for 24 hours. Her body is shutting down. She's hallucinating. She sees shadows moving in the trees. She hears voices. Her vision is tunneling. She's hitting the wall, the point where your body runs out of glycogen and starts eating its own muscle. She forces herself to eat more bread, drink more water, but her stomach is rebelling. She dry heaves on the side of the road, then gets back on the bike. Mile 145. It starts to rain. Cold, driving rain. She's soaked in minutes. The road turns to mud. The bike slides. She crashes into a ditch, gets up, checks the bike. The handlebars are bent. She straightens them with her bare hands, gets back on, keeps riding. Mile 155, Châteauroux. She arrives at 3 now a.m. She's been riding for 32 hours with maybe 2 hours of rest total. She stumbles to the safe house, pounds on the door. The radio operator opens it. He doesn't recognize her. She's covered in mud. Her face is gaunt. Her eyes are sunken. She looks like a corpse. "Codes," she rasps. He brings her to the radio. Her hands are shaking so bad she can barely hold the pencil. She writes the message, "Mouchet dispersed, radio destroyed, send codes via courier, critical." She taps it out in Morse. London replies, "Received, codes will be sent, return immediately." The operator looks at her. "You need to sleep. No time. You'll die if you get back on that bike." Nancy drinks a cup of tea, eats a piece of stale bread, rests for 90 minutes. Then she gets back on the bike. She has to ride back. The return trip is hell. The rain continues. She's riding through a storm, lightning flashing, thunder rolling through the mountains. She can barely see the road. She crashes again and again. Her elbows are scraped raw. Her knees are bleeding. The bike frame is cracked, but it's still rideable. She falls asleep while riding. She wakes up when she hits the gravel shoulder. She's heading for a ravine. She jerks the handlebars, skids to a stop. Her heart is pounding. She was seconds from going over the edge. She slaps herself in the face. Hard. Stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. Mile 280. She's 30 miles from camp. The sun is rising on day 3. She's been riding for 68 hours. Her body is done. Her legs are moving on. Autopilot. She's not thinking anymore. She's just pedaling. Mile 295. She sees the hills of Chaude's Aigues in the distance. She's close. So close. Mile 310. She rolls into the Maquis camp. It's been 71 hours since she left. The men stare at her. They thought she was dead. They see this figure, covered in mud, limping, dragging a broken bike. The frame is cracked. The handlebars are bent. The tires are shredded. She lets the bike crash to the ground. She looks at Gaspard, who's staring at her with his mouth open. "Get the men ready," she whispered. "The planes are coming tonight." 71 hours, 300 miles, on a bicycle through Nazi-occupied France. That's not heroism. That's superhuman. That's the kind of thing that, if it was in a movie, you'd say, that's unrealistic. Nobody could do that. But Nancy Wake did it. And she wasn't done. Here's why that ride mattered. Without those codes, the Maquis were finished. No airdrops, no weapons, just armed civilians waiting to get hunted down. Nancy's ride saved them. The codes arrived, the airdrops resumed, and when the Allies landed in southern France, Operation Dragoon, the Maquis were ready. 7,000 fighters, armed, trained, they hit the Germans from behind, cut rail lines, blew bridges, ambushed convoys, forced the Germans to fight on two fronts. How many American lives did that save on the beaches? Hundreds? Thousands? Every day the war ends earlier means fewer body bags going home. Nancy's bicycle ride shortened the war. Maybe not by much, but enough. She didn't have to do it. She could have sent someone else. I'm not a courier. I'm a liaison officer. But she got on the bike. Because she understood leadership. You don't ask people to do what you won't do yourself. When she told the Maquis to risk their lives, she was right there. When she told them to hold Mouchet, she held the line. And when someone had to ride 310 miles through enemy territory, she did it. That's why 7,000 rough bastards followed her orders. Not because she was British, not because she was SOE, because she bled with them. Remember that vow she made in Vienna in 1933? If I ever get the chance, I'm going to make these bastards pay. Well, she'd survived. She'd escaped. She'd become the most wanted person in France. And now, with the Allies pushing in from Normandy and the south, Nancy realized something. Time was running out. The war would be over soon. And if she was going to keep her promise, she had to do it now. After that ride, Nancy became a legend among the Maquis. Not because she was a woman, not because she was British, but because she'd done something that seemed physically impossible, and she'd done it for them. The story spread. Other Maquis groups heard about it. The White Mouse, who rode 310 miles on a broken bicycle and came back alive. The woman who told a German sentry to his face that she needed to find a doctor, and he believed her. The fighter who'd rather die than surrender. The air drops came that night, as promised. 6 Halifax bombers flying low, canisters tumbling from the bomb bays, parachutes blossoming white against the night sky. Weapons, ammo, explosives, radios, medical supplies, everything they needed to continue the fight. The Maquis reorganized. They'd learned their lesson at Mouchet. No more pitched battles, no more standing and fighting. Now they were ghosts, hit and run, ambush and fade, make the Germans bleed for every kilometer. And Nancy was right in the middle of it. Her next mission: cut the rail line between Montluçon and Clermont-Ferrand. The Germans were moving troops and supplies north to reinforce Normandy. Every train she stopped was one less battalion the Allies had to face. July 15th, 1944. Nancy led a team of 12 men. The target, a rail bridge over the Allier River, 3 miles south of Montluçon. Stone and steel construction, built in the 1870s, heavily guarded. They moved at night. No moon, perfect conditions. They approached from the river, wading through waist-deep water to avoid the road sentries. Cold, quiet, slow. Nancy carried 22 pounds of PE 808, plastic explosive, enough to drop the span if placed correctly. They reached the bridge pilings at WWII. German sentries above, patrolling the deck. Nancy could hear their boots on the steel. She could hear them talking, complaining about the cold, about the war, about being stuck in France while their friends were fighting on the Eastern Front. She worked by feel, placed the charges on the support beams, molded the plastique around the steel, inserted the detonators, ran the DT cord, spliced the connections. She'd done this 100 times in training. Muscle memory. 20 minutes to place the charges, 5 minutes to rig the firing circuit. Then a sound that makes her blood freeze. Footsteps coming down the stairs. A sentry coming to check the pilings. Nancy presses herself against the stone. She's in the shadows. But if he shines a torch, he'll see the charges. And if he sees the charges, he'll sound the alarm. And if he sounds the alarm, they're dead. The sentry reaches the bottom of the stairs. He's 10 feet away. He lights a cigarette. The match flares. Nancy can see his face. He's young, maybe 19. He looks tired. He smokes the cigarette, flicks the butt into the river, turns and walks back up the stairs. Nancy waits until he's gone. Then she finishes the job, runs the wire to the detonator, sets the timer for 15 minutes, enough time to get clear. They wade back through the river, climb the far bank, take cover in the tree line. 15 minutes later, boom! The bridge doesn't collapse immediately. The charges sever the support beams. For a moment, the bridge hangs there, suspended by inertia. Then gravity takes over. The center span drops into the river with a roar like thunder. The rail line is cut. It'll take the Germans 2 weeks to repair. 2 weeks where no trains run. 2 weeks where no reinforcements reach. Normandy. Nancy and her team melted back into the forest. By dawn, they were 18 miles away, hidden in a safe house, eating hot soup and planning the next strike. Because there was always a next strike. 2 days later, July 17th. The target wasn't a bridge, it was fuel. Intelligence said the depot outside Vichy held 130,000 gallons of aviation fuel, enough to keep the Luftwaffe flying sorties for a month. The depot was guarded by a platoon of Wehrmacht infantry. 40 men, concrete bunkers, machine gun nests, searchlights. Not an easy target. Nancy's plan: don't fight them, sneak past them. They waited for a moonless night. 3 men. Nancy, a Maquis sergeant named Claude, and a 17-year-old kid named Michel, who claimed he could pick any lock. They approached from the east, using a drainage culvert to get under the perimeter fence. The culvert was narrow. You had to crawl. Nancy went first, dragging a bag with 33 pounds of explosives and incendiary charges. The culvert smelled like sewage and rot. Water up to her elbows. Rats everywhere. She could feel them crawling over her back. She kept moving. They emerged inside the depot perimeter, 50 yards from the fuel tanks. 4 massive steel cylinders, each one 3 stories tall, painted gray. No guards nearby. All the sentries were on the perimeter. Michael picked the lock on the access gate. 90 seconds. The kid was good. They moved between the tanks, staying in the shadows. Nancy placed incendiary charges at the base of each tank. White phosphorus and thermite. Burns at 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt steel. She set the timers for 30 minutes, long enough to get clear, short enough that the Germans couldn't find and defuse them. They crawled back through the culvert, reached the tree line, took cover. At 03:15, the first charge ignited. The tank didn't explode, it melted. The thermite burned through the steel like a blowtorch through butter. Aviation fuel poured out, thousands of gallons per second. When it hit the thermite, it ignited. The fire spread. Tank 2, Tank 3, Tank 4. Within 5 minutes, the entire depot was an inferno. Flames 160 feet high. Black smoke blotting out the stars. The heat was so intense that trees 300 feet away burst into flame. The Germans couldn't stop it. They tried. Fire trucks arrived, hoses, water. But you can't put out a thermite fire with water. Water just makes it burn hotter. The depot burned for 3 days. 130,000 gallons of fuel. Gone. The Luftwaffe units in central France were grounded. No fuel, no sorties. For 2 weeks, the skies belonged to the Allies. Nancy watched the fire from a hillside a mile away. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just turned to Claude and said, "Next target." 10 days later, July 28th. The Germans were effectively grounded. Now she wanted them deaf. The target was a telecommunications hub outside Moulins. The Germans were using it to coordinate troop movements across central France. Destroy the hub and you blind them. They can't coordinate. They can't respond to attacks. The hub was in a converted chateau, stone walls, guarded, but not heavily. The Germans didn't expect an attack this far behind the lines. Nancy's team, 8 men. The plan, fast and violent, no subtlety. They hit at dawn, crashed through the gate in a stolen truck, threw grenades through the windows, charged inside before the Germans knew what was happening. The firefight lasted 4 minutes. Nancy carried a Sten gun, a British submachine gun, crude, unreliable, jams constantly, but at close range, it's lethal. She cleared 3 rooms, German signals officers, some armed, some not. She didn't have time to sort them out. This wasn't war, it was slaughter. They found the main switchboard in the basement, hundreds of cables, telephone lines, telegraph wires, all the communications for a 30-mile radius. Nancy pulled a satchel charge from her bag. 11 pounds of TNT. Set the fuse for 60 seconds. Dropped it on the switchboard. Out! Now! They ran. The chateau exploded behind them. The blast wave shattered every window within 200 yards. The building collapsed. The communications hub was destroyed. For 72 hours, the Germans in central France were operating blind. No phone, no telegraph, no way to call for reinforcements or coordinate responses. The Maquis hit them everywhere. Ambushes, raids, sabotage, and the Germans couldn't respond because they couldn't communicate. August 3rd. They had the initiative. Now they needed bullets. An ammunition depot near Commentry. The Maquis needed ammo. The Germans had it. Simple arithmetic. The depot was underground, an old quarry converted to storage. 1 entrance, 1 road in, heavily guarded. Nancy didn't try to sneak in. She used a different tactic. Bribery. One of the Maquis had a cousin who worked at the depot. A French civilian, forced to work for the Germans. He hated them. But he was scared. Nancy met with him in secret. "Help us," she said. "Or when this war ends, people will remember that you worked for the Germans, that you helped them, that you were a collaborator." The threat was implicit. After liberation, collaborators were shot. The cousin agreed. He gave Nancy the guard schedule, the patrol routes, the location of the ammo storage, August 3rd, 22. Nancy led a team of 15 men. They approached from the south, using the tree line for cover. The cousin had left a side door unlocked. They slipped inside. The depot was huge, tunnels carved into the rock, crates stacked floor to ceiling, rifle ammunition, machine gun belts, mortar rounds, artillery shells, grenades. Enough to fight a war. They didn't take it all. That would take too long. Instead, Nancy had the men grab what they could carry: small arms ammo, grenades, explosives, light and portable. Then she rigged the place to blow. 20 charges, placed on the support columns. If the columns fail, the roof collapses. And if the roof collapses on thousands of tons of high explosive. They set the timers for 15 minutes. Ran. At 22:30, the depot exploded. The blast was so large it registered on seismographs in Lyon, 95 miles away. The quarry collapsed. Thousands of tons of rock and earth buried the ammunition. The explosion was so violent that it created a crater 100 feet deep. 3 Germans killed. 1 French collaborator, the cousin, who'd been caught by the Germans after Nancy's team left. They shot him before he could talk. He died a hero, even if no one would ever know it. Nancy heard about his death 2 days later. She didn't say anything, but that night she drank a toast. To the ones who never made it home. By mid-August 1944, Nancy Wake was no longer human. She was a myth, a ghost story that German soldiers told each other in the dark. The white mouse. She's everywhere. She's nowhere. She'll kill you in your sleep. She'll burn your base. She'll cut your throat and vanish into the night. The Germans put a price on her head. 5 million francs, the highest bounty of the war for any Allied agent. But no one ever claimed it, because no one who saw Nancy Wake lived long enough to report it. And she kept her promise. The one she made in Vienna in 1933, when she saw a Jewish man beaten in the street. If I ever get the chance, I'm going to make these bastards pay. She made them pay. In blood, in fire, in terror. Between June and August 1944, over 30 combat operations, at least 14 Germans killed with her own hands. Bridges, rail lines, fuel depots, communications hubs, ammunition dumps, all destroyed. Thousands of resistance fighters, organized, trained, commanded, not for glory, not for medals, because someone had to stand up, because evil doesn't stop until someone stops it. By mid-August 1944, Nancy had run the table: rail bridges, fuel depots, communication hubs, ammo dumps, every target hit, every mission successful. She wasn't just fighting, she was dismantling the German War Machine 1 explosive at a time. The Germans were terrified of her. They knew the White Mouse was operating in the area, but they couldn't catch her. She moved between safe houses. She changed her appearance constantly. She spoke perfect French. She could blend in anywhere. The Gestapo increased the bounty to 5 million francs. That's equivalent to about $1.5 million today, the highest price on any agent's head in France. Higher than any general, higher than any spy. But they couldn't catch her. Late summer, 1944. Nancy decided it was time to send a message, a personal message. The target, Gestapo headquarters in Mont, the same building where they'd interrogated her friends, where they'd tortured resistance fighters, where they'd kept the files with her picture on them. This wasn't just a military target. This was personal. It was a fortress of terror, thick walls, barred windows, and a basement that swallowed people whole. Nancy's orders were simple and brutal. Hit it! Burn it! No prisoners! She organized a textbook dawn raid. She led 50 men, faces blackened with burnt cork. They moved in silence, boots wrapped in rags to muffle the sound. They approached from the rear courtyard. Nancy signaled the breach team. 3, 2, 1. 2 engineers slapped a frame charge on the heavy oak doors. Boom! The explosion vaporized the entrance. The overpressure blew out the windows on the ground floor. Before the dust could settle, Nancy was through the breach, screaming, "Allez!" The lobby was chaos. German guards were stumbling out, half-dressed, reaching for weapons. Nancy met them with a wall of lead. She swept the room with her Sten gun. Brap, brap. Controlled bursts. She dropped 3 guards before they could even unholster their Lugers. She didn't stop. She charged up the stairs leading from the front. This is the fatal funnel, the most dangerous place in a firefight. A German officer popped out on the landing. He raised his pistol. Nancy didn't hesitate. She put 2 rounds in his chest, 1 in his head, the classic double tap. Muscle memory. They cleared the building room by room, kick the door, toss a grenade, spray the room. It was brutal, close-quarters violence. The smell of cordite and blood filled the air. In one office, she found two SS officers trying to burn documents in a wood stove. They looked up, terrified. They saw a woman in a British uniform, covered in dust, holding a smoking gun. One raised his hands to surrender. Nancy hesitated. This was the moment. The line between soldier and executioner, between justice and revenge. She thought about the cells in the basement. She thought about her friends who had been tortured. She thought about Henri. She thought about what her mother might have told her. Stay human. But some men forfeit their humanity through their choices. These weren't conscripts. These were Gestapo, the ones who pulled fingernails, the ones who used the basement. She didn't take prisoners. When the shooting stopped, they went down to the basement. The engineers blew the lock. The air rushed out, the smell of bleach, rot, and fear. They found the prisoners, skeletons, beaten, broken, huddled in the dark. Nancy cut their bonds herself. She gave an old man her jacket because he was shivering uncontrollably. "C'est fini?" she told him, her voice cracking. "It's over." Real victory isn't a parade. It's cutting the chains off a prisoner in a Nazi basement. Next target, a factory repairing Panzer engines. Frontal assault was suicide. So she went in quietly. Stealth mission, 2 a.m. Nancy is planting explosives when a guard catches her, 10 feet away. He reaches for his whistle. If he blows it, she's dead. She doesn't run, she doesn't shoot. In one motion, she's on him. Left hand covers his mouth. Right hand, a single strike to the throat. His neck breaks. She holds him as he dies. Later, she said, "I was surprised how easily he died." And, "Here's the thing about killing someone. Your first instinct, even after you've taken their life, is to help them, to pick them up." Nancy felt that instinct every single time. That's what separates resistance fighters from monsters. They never lost their humanity, even when doing inhuman things. That's the reality of war. Not Hollywood, not glory, just survival, and the weight you carry forever. She blew the factory. The Panzer Division lost their engines. Game over. By August 1944, the Allies were in Paris. The war in France was essentially over. Nancy marched into Vichy on the hood of a jeep, surrounded by cheering crowds. A hero, a legend. The men she'd led were buying her drinks, slapping her on the back, telling stories about the White Mouse that would only get bigger with time. But amidst the celebration, Nancy had a knot in her stomach, because there was one person who should have been there, one person she'd been fighting to get back to this entire time. Henri. She hadn't heard from him in over a year. No letters, no messages, just silence. She asked SOE, nothing. Free French Intelligence, nothing. Red Cross. No Henri Fiocca on our lists, so she borrowed a jeep and drove to Marseille. Their apartment on Rue de Breteuil was still standing. Door locked. Nobody home. She found the concierge. Old woman named Madame Leclerc. Used to know them before the war. Madame Leclerc went pale when she saw Nancy. "Madame Fiocca, I thought you were dead." "Where's Henri?" The old woman looked down. "Where is Henri?" "The Gestapo came, April 1943. They took him." April 1943. That was 16 months ago. While she was fighting, Henri was already gone. "Where did they take him?" "Fort Montluc, in Lyon." Fort Montluc, Klaus Barbie's prison, the butcher of Lyon. Nobody came back from there. Nancy drove to Lyon, found the Gestapo files, found Henri's folder. The file was thin. A photograph. Henri, gaunt, bruised. Dated September 1943. Interrogation. Log. Subject, Henri Fiocca, married to the White Mouse. Interrogation sessions, 47. Methods, standard. Result, subject refused all information. Died, 16th of October 1943. Heart failure during interrogation. Heart failure. That's what they called it when the torture killed you. 47 sessions, 5 months. They beat him, shocked him, drowned him, and Henri never talked, never gave her up. He died protecting her. Nancy folded the file, walked out, drove back to Marseille, sat in their empty apartment, and for the first time since the war started, Nancy Wake cried. She blamed herself forever. "I killed him," she'd say decades later. But here's the truth. Henri knew. When Nancy started the resistance work, Henri funded it. When the Gestapo came hunting, Henri told her to run. When they tortured him, he had one way out: just talk. He chose silence. He chose her. That's love. The difference was, Nancy survived. Henri didn't, and survivors carry that weight. After the war, medals. Lots of medals. George Medal, Croix de Guerre, U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom, more than any other woman in WWII. Big ceremony, dress uniforms, cameras, politicians making speeches. Nancy stood there thinking about Henri, about the kid Michel who died 2 weeks after picking that lock. A reporter asked, "What are you going to do now?" "I'm going to get very drunk, then I'm going to try to forget." But you can't forget. War memories don't work like that. They show up at 3 a.m., when you're doing dishes, when you're trying to sleep. Nancy tried normal life, married another British officer, moved to Australia. Didn't work. He hadn't been there, didn't understand the nightmares. Divorced in the 50s. He was a good man, but I was too broken. Ran for Parliament twice, lost both times. Why? She campaigned like a soldier. When a heckler said women shouldn't be in government, Nancy told him to piss off and die. Voters love honesty. They don't vote for it. She tried regular jobs, sales, marketing. How do you go from leading 7,000 fighters to selling insurance? You don't. Moved back to England in the 80s, lived alone, gin and tonic at 11 a.m. sharp. Doctor's orders. Old SOE friends would visit. They'd drink, smoke, tell war stories. For a few hours they were young again, immortal again. Then the friends started dying, one by one, until Nancy was the last one left. By the 2000s, she was in a veterans' home. Small room, bed, chair, bottle of gin. She sold all her medals, needed rent money. The press freaked out. "How could you sell your medals?" Nancy shrugged. "Can't pay rent with a ribbon. I'll probably go to hell anyway, so they'd just melt." August 7th, 2011. Nancy Wake died at 98. She'd outlived her enemies, outlived almost everyone from the war. Headlines everywhere. World War II's most decorated servicewoman dies. Australia offered a state funeral. Nancy had already refused it. "No politicians standing over my grave pretending they knew me." Her final wish? Take me back to the woods. She wanted her ashes in the Auvergne forests, where she'd fought, where she'd slept rough with her Maquis, where she'd become the White Mouse. 2013. 20 people flew to France, veterans, historians, a French honor guard. They hiked 2 miles into the Auvergne forests, same place Nancy had hidden in 44. Private ceremony, no press, no politicians. Pierre, 88 years old, had been 19 when he met Nancy. Fought at Mouchet. Saw her come back from that bicycle ride. He opened the urn, scattered her ashes. The honor guard fired 3 volleys. The sound echoed through the valley. Nancy Wake is there now, in the soil where she fought. Nancy Wake died in 2011 at age 98, but her message is clear. You can have all the tanks, all the secret police, all the torture chambers, but if you push a free person too far, you better be ready for the White Mouse. That's the story. Raw, real, the kind they don't teach in schools. If you Believe the next generation needs to know about heroes like Nancy, not the sanitized version, but the real one. Hit subscribe. Leave a comment. What do you think it takes to be that brave?